What is up, you guys? So I wanted you to see my Halloween background and let me know if you like it. Obviously, this is not a Halloween video, but my backgrounds are all put up and tear down because I don't have my own set space. And I was going to do a regular background, but I don't know what I'm going to put up yet for that. So let me know what you think about the background. Um, and I'm gonna go turn the light on and we'll talk about the case of Aeryn Gillern. I didn't want anyone to think I was being disrespectful by putting a Halloween spooky background in the background of this video, but I wanted to know your guys' opinion. Do you like this better with the background behind me? Let me know, and let's get into Aeryn Gillern part 2. Hi, I am Gemma Jade. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe if you end up liking this video. To my regular subscribers, I want you to know I finally figured out how to do iCards and the cards at the end suggesting the video. So I'm super excited about that. I'm trying this new setup like I just said. So this is part 2. If you have not seen part 1, I suggest you go back and watch it because this case has so much information. You guys are definitely going to be confused and miss something. So I'll put the card right here. I think it's right here, right here, right here. So, okay, Aeryn Michael John Gillern. If you guys remember where we left off, his mother, Catherine, and an associate from UNIDO where Aeryn worked, named Mr. Unstein or Unstein, I'm not sure. I don't remember. Went to the police station to pick up Aeryn's belongings that he had left on the night of October 29th at the Kaiser Brundle sauna when he ran out naked. The belongings were in a black plastic garbage bag that was haphazardly thrown on the floor as if it were in fact garbage and not the belongings of a missing and possibly deceased person that you're giving to a grieving mother. As Catherine sat on the floor going through her son's belongings and smelling her son's shirt over and over again. You ever miss somebody and you just want to wear their shirt and smell them? Or I definitely know the feeling. And as she was doing this, she was going to vomit, or as she said, be sick. And the investigators that were in there were like, well, they shrugged and kind of looked away and told her that she could not use the bathroom. They also refused her tissue. She begged and pleaded. She was basically on her hands and knees begging and pleading these detectives to let her use the bathroom so she can vomit and get sick and cry in privacy and not in front of these a-holes that had treated her and her son so horribly. Part 1 was like they treated her like the Queen of England compared to how she's treated going forward, and what I'm going to explain in part 2. Finally, Unstein yells something in German, and the one detective who had earlier taunted Catherine about her son Aeryn being named Mr. Gay Austria reluctantly grabbed the keys, motioned for her to come in, where she went into the bathroom. She vomited, she cried, she prayed, she screamed. She was so frustrated and so sick, and smelling the scent of her son and seeing his belongings just set her off. I mean, can you imagine? Unstein finally comes in and tells her that maybe they should get going. And that's where we left off in part 1. As the two left the police station holding this giant bag of belongings, Catherine recounted in tears as Mr. Unstein, the man who was supposed to be Aeryn's friend and colleague, who was her escort, who had just helped her be able to have some privacy to use the bathroom, someone who she thought was a friend, turned to her as she was carrying this bag of her possibly deceased and missing son's belongings down the streets in Vienna, walking to the train station, and said, quote, "I can't help you anymore. I'm busy and have a lot of stuff going on with work and my own personal life, and I can't help you anymore," end quote. He then turned and walked away and left Catherine standing there holding this giant bag, standing on the street by herself, to walk to the train station alone to take the train back to Aeryn's apartment. I'm sure she was heartbroken and feeling like the whole world was against her. This was so sudden. This man had been helping her up until this point, and she never did get an explanation as to why he really did that. It wasn't until later on that night when Catherine was finally back at Aeryn's house that she finally had the strength to, quote, really look through it, meaning Aeryn's belongings. She said she found in Aeryn's bag the copy of the HIV report, the HIV results that he had received the night that he went missing, that had become that point of contention that he was in fact HIV negative, and she had it there in paper. So the police had lied about that. If you remember in part 1, they said one of the reasons they believed he committed spontaneous suicide is because he was HIV positive and depressed about it. And his partner Posse, said that he had just gotten an HIV test and it had come back negative that day, the day he went missing, and the police said that this was not true. Aeryn's belongings obviously had already been looked through by the police, so they knew that this paper existed. They were just blatantly lying the entire time. Catherine also said she came across Aeryn's cell phone, and because she's technologically challenged, I can definitely relate. She said that she called the upstairs neighbor, Aeryn's upstairs neighbor, Umberto, and asked him to come downstairs and look through the phone calls and the text messages to see if the police were right about the timestamp on Aeryn's phone being off. Again, you need to watch part 1. Umberto came down and went through the phone. He knew a lot about phones. It doesn't really say how, but it says that he knew basically what he was doing and that there was nothing wrong with Aeryn's phone. The timestamp was on. It was precise. It was the right time. So again, the police had access to his phone, to his belongings, and blatantly lied to Catherine and everybody else that was there, everybody else involved, by saying that the timing was wrong on Aeryn's phone the night that he went missing. Catherine was asked what she thought when she saw the results of the HIV test, and she responded, quote, "I know they're lying. They just don't care. He's just a gay man. He's not Austrian. And they just don't care. They just don't care. They just don't care, or they're covering something up," end quote. Catherine said when she saw the lab report and the phone, she was sickened, but she was also scared now because she didn't know where to turn. She couldn't trust the police, and who do you go to when you have a missing family member, a missing child, a missing son, if you can't go to the police? That's gotta be scary. She also stated, quote, "I've already met with the embassy, and I know the embassy is not going to do a damn thing for me," end quote. So again, confused, scared, probably feeling like the whole world was against her at this point. On November 7th, 2007, Catherine went to the United States Consulate office, and she said that while she was there, she had to sit at a table with a bunch of random people, random strangers, who were filling out paperwork for their passport, and she had to talk about her missing son, her, quote, "missing gay son," end quote. So I guess that came up. So she has to be made to talk about these personal things about her son with these random people because they didn't even take her into a room for privacy when she went there for help about her son. I believe she said the woman Constance Anderson that she spoke to, that her title was Consulate General. I couldn't understand what Catherine said in the interview, and I can't insert a clip because I'll be copyright striked. So I think she said Consulate General. It was somebody really high up in charge. So this woman, Constance Anderson, turned to Catherine, and when she heard that Aeryn was gay, the entire thing about him disappearing went completely out the window, and all she said was that she was going to pray for him. For being gay, not for being missing, not praying that he comes back safely or that they find him or get some answers or some justice or that something. She's just going to pray because the man's gay. Catherine said, quote, "I now have the security liaison person who doesn't want to work with me anymore. UNIDO, because they are a guest in Austria, will send translators with me, but they don't want to do anything else, and I am at a loss." End quote. She said she knew she was going to have to, quote, "pull it together and find out what happened to her son because nobody else was going to help her, and she said she was going to go to the ends of the earth until her last breath, if that's what it took, to find out what happened to her only son, Aeryn." And I don't blame her. This entire case makes me so sick. I can't even believe other YouTubers aren't covering it. But moving on, Gemma. This is going to sound a little bit confusing, but please bear with me. I am going somewhere with it. Catherine said she knew a person who knew a person who knew a person that knew the owner of a gay bookstore who knew Aeryn and who might be willing to speak with her and maybe offer some help. She said that she had no other leads and she had no idea where this information would go, but she might as well start somewhere, so she made her way to the gay bookstore. Keep in mind that all this is happening before anything about Aeryn even hit the press. So she really is kind of on her own. So she gets to this gay bookstore. She asks for the owner, whose name is Veep. And Veep agrees to talk to her. She tells him who she is and what's going on with Aeryn. And she said she, quote, just blurted it all out, end quote. And Veep seemed like he was sympathetic to her plight, seemed that, he felt bad for her and he really wanted to help. So he assured her that he would make some phone calls and definitely get back to her to see what he can help her do. While she was there, he also informed her that about 2 weeks before Aeryn went missing or disappeared, the police in Vienna had started a support group for officers, for police officers in the police force who were gay or lesbian, because all of the discrimination that had been going on against gay and lesbian police officers in Vienna, they finally had this support group. In fact, the gay and lesbian community in Vienna as a whole was so distrustful of this police department that these officers that were in this like committee for gay and lesbian officers were trained to be liaisons between the regular police officers and the gay and lesbian community in Vienna. That's how bad it is, or was. I don't know if it's still that way. I don't think I have subscribers in Austria, in Vienna, to tell me any different. Veep told her that he knew the guy who kind of ran this group, and the group was called, quote, Gay Cops Austria, end quote. Pretty obvious name. And that he was going to make a phone call to this guy and see if he could help, since Aeryn was homosexual. The man Veep knew, as I said, was the head of this group, the president, and his name was Ewald Weedy. And I'll put it up on the screen because I think I'm pronouncing it right. I'm pronouncing it how Catherine pronounced it, but I'm sorry again, guys, if I butchered that. Catherine said Ewald Weedy met with her that same night that she met Veep at the bookstore, so it was pretty fast. He seemed very interested. He talked to her for about an hour. Catherine gave him everything that had been happening with the police, every little tiny bit of information that had happened since the night Aeryn disappeared, she gave to Ewald, and Ewald wrote it all down, took all of her information. Ewald called a friend of his at the call center, which Catherine said she kind of believes is the same thing that we have in America as the 911 dispatch center. So it's like the emergency call line for the first district. And the first district is where Aeryn disappeared from, where the Kaiser Brundle bathhouse spa sauna was at. And this dispatcher said that no calls at all had come in on the night of October 29th, 2007, the night Aeryn disappeared. Keep in mind, the first district is also where the Danube or Danube Canal is located. So what about the call from the fishermen? We'll find out about that soon. Ewald was also informed that no calls had come in to be dispatched to the Kaiser Brundle. Remember, there was supposedly a fight with tourists, and the police were called, but the guy Gustav said the police were called, but he only received an ambulance in the fire department. According to this dispatcher who was friends with Ewald, there were no calls from the Kaiser Brundle either. Catherine said this information right here is when she realized her mistrust of the police was confirmed. And I guess that comes from being a retired police officer for 21 years, as Catherine was in New York, because my mistrust of the police officers would have started before I even walked through the door, being me. But if I was in her situation, and I'm not judging, I'm just saying if it were me, my mistrust would have been confirmed long ago. So I give her a lot of respect and a lot of credit for continuously giving them the benefit of the doubt, despite how they were treating her. It took all of this, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back, that finally showed Catherine that the police were lying, if not that they were corrupt. Catherine stated about this, quote, I just want answers. I just want the truth. I want justice. I want my son. Most of all, I just want my son. Um, I know everybody tells me to hope, and it's a very scary thing to hang on to. End quote. On November 13th, Catherine once again had a meeting with the police. Ewald set this meeting with the police up for her with the man who supposedly helped start the gay and lesbian support group, the Gay Cops Austria. But I don't know the man's name. The man wanted to remain anonymous. So that man was going to this meeting with Catherine. He told Ewald that he was, quote, very interested in this, end quote. Ewald also assured Catherine that somebody from the actual group, like I guess this anonymous guy helped set the group up but wasn't a part of it, somebody actually from the group was also going to be there with her for support and to help her out. And I guess she thought to advocate for her or advocate with her for Aeryn. The psychologist from UNIDO named Angelica Radux was also there. She also accompanied Catherine to the meeting. The meeting was set up at the same police station in the same room where Aeryn's belongings were thrown on the floor, where Catherine was made to beg and plead on her hands and knees for a tissue and to vomit in the bathroom instead of all over the floor. So same police station, same little room, and I can't even imagine what must have been going through her mind at that point. Like, I don't even know. Imagine that. Now she's got to go back there and deal with these same people again. Catherine said Angelica, who not only accompanied her, but also was going to be the interpreter between Catherine and the authorities, started off the meeting by requesting that the investigators, quote, only talk for a minute or two to give me enough time to translate and talk again so that Aeryn's mother, if she has any questions, can ask them, end quote. The investigator responded, quote, no, end quote, in English. He then looked to Angelica and spoke in German, so Catherine couldn't understand. Catherine said that as the man spoke in German to Angelica, she saw Angelica's shoulders slump, kind of like defeated. And when she turned to translate to Catherine what the man had just said, he basically said that no, he was not going to give any time for Angelica to translate, that he was not going to wait for her to translate and to make sure that Catherine could understand. He was going to, quote, conduct the meeting however he wanted to conduct it, end quote. Catherine said the investigator then began speaking in German so quickly that Angelica couldn't even keep up translating to Catherine. And even Angelica, by the middle of it, had no idea what was going on because the man was speaking so fast and he was speaking nonstop. So he was purposely not putting breaks in. So Angelica couldn't even, like I said, speak fast enough to be able to translate to Catherine. And Catherine was extremely frustrated. This is ridiculous. I thought these other people here were supposed to be at this meeting to be helping her advocate for herself and for Aeryn. What the hell is going on? She said after about 10 minutes of this, she just got so fed up, she stood up and yelled, quote, this is unacceptable, end quote. To which the man, who seemingly was in charge, stood up, got in her face, and yelled, quote, no, you are unacceptable, you are rude, end quote. This man's name was Gerhard Heimeter, and he was the lieutenant colonel in the police station. Catherine responded to this outburst from the man by saying, quote, I am unacceptable. I am not unacceptable. I don't know what's going on or what's being said. You speak English and you're letting this man speak in German and not letting her translate. You obviously speak English. You are unacceptable, end quote. As she once again was reduced because of her frustration to tears. She continued, quote, this is wrong and you know it's wrong, end quote. To this, the man rolled his eyes and stated, quote, well, then you don't understand. You don't understand how an investigation works, and you don't understand things like spontaneous suicide, end quote. Which, if you remember, that's what they were trying to tell her happened. Aeryn randomly jumped in the canal for no reason. He was HIV positive, which we know isn't true. All that stuff from part 1. So the spontaneous suicide thing is now coming up again. They're still sticking to that story, even though we know it's BS already, right? Catherine then felt the need to inform him, of course, that she spoke to many psychologists and psychiatrists trying to look up this spontaneous suicide thing. And she actually found out from actual, medically trained psychiatrists and psychologists that spontaneous suicide is not a thing. It doesn't exist. It's not a term that's used, it's not an accepted term. There's no such thing, in essence, or in actuality, of spontaneous suicide. So there goes that theory. After Catherine said this, Lieutenant Highmeter, or Hammeter, I think it's Highmeter, walked up to her, sat down next to her, and actually put his hands on her legs. Catherine moved back, kind of disgusted, and told him, "Don't touch me." At this, he removed his hands, but then looked her straight in the eye and asked her what kind of police officer she used to be. He said to her, quote, "What were you, a meter maid?" End quote. And that's exactly how Catherine did it, with that smug, sarcastic, patronizing smile on his face. I could go on and on and on and on about this horrific and unacceptable, as Catherine stated, behavior by investigators towards Catherine. I don't know where these gay and lesbian police officer from Gay Cops Austria advocates were, but according to Ewald, they were supposed to be attending this meeting, but I didn't see anything about them jumping in or defending her or even being at the meeting. I can continue to state, quote by quote, every horrible and terrible and unacceptable and rude and corrupt thing that they said to her and everything that she said back. But I hope that you get the gist of it in the interest of saving time and not being redundant, as a lot of it is the same BS that has been happening in this part and also in part 1. So I'd like to just fast forward just a little bit from this meeting as you get the gist of the meeting. When she and Angelica were going to leave, the investigators tried to keep them to stay, but I guess they didn't want them to stay that bad because the Lieutenant Highmeter got distracted by someone saying something to him and wandered off. And finally, Catherine and Angelica were able to leave the police station, having accomplished nothing, more frustrated than when she entered, and I'm sure feeling more and more hopeless as the seconds ticked by. Before they walked out, though, Highmeter gave Catherine a little stack of notes that he had taken during this interview, and it was this meeting. It was written in German, and he told Catherine, "Sign it." And she said that she wasn't going to sign that. She couldn't understand. She couldn't read it. And it was notes that he had taken. She didn't trust him. And even Angelica looked at her and was like, "Oh, you have to sign that." And Catherine said, "I am not signing anything. I don't understand it. I don't trust this man. I can't read it. It's written in German. I'm not signing it." And she refused to sign it. And I guess this is why, and I should have stated this before, they were going to try to not allow Catherine and Angelica to leave the police station, but then Highmeter got distracted and wandered off, and they left. Sorry about that, guys. A little bit out of order there. Convoluted case. I just want to state here that from everything that I've read and the interview and the documentary that I watched and all the news articles and everything I've learned, it breaks my heart to see that Aeryn lived and worked in and loved Vienna, and he loved this country. He loved Austria too. And it let him down so badly. It failed him so badly. The police just kept making meetings with Catherine and accepting these meetings to be sarcastic and rude and horrible, unimaginable to the mother of a missing person seeking help in a foreign country. Again, that her son lived in and loved so much that he wanted her to sell her house in New York, in the United States, and move there. And look how badly it's letting him down. It just hurts. I cried so many times, especially watching the documentary with Catherine, and I'll give you the information about that at the end of this video of how you can watch and see it. The entire thing is just Catherine talking. Keep in mind that up to this point, there was still no press coverage about Aeryn. And when Catherine started asking investigators why there was no press coverage, they told her that they didn't think it was necessary. that they didn't see how, being on the news and being in the papers could help the investigation in any way. Because remember, they were still sticking to spontaneous suicide. They didn't want to hear it wasn't a thing. They didn't care. This was their story. They were sticking to it. Catherine said that she didn't understand and no one was explaining to her how the police could be so sure that there were no witnesses that night, that if put in the press, if made to be reminded of this, that wouldn't come forward if prompted by the media. Like, the media puts out a call for help. Were there any witnesses here or there that night? How were they so sure there weren't any? They had no way of knowing. And when she asked this of Lieutenant Highmeter, he just rolled his eyes at her and continued his, barrage and berating in German. Anyway, someone must have been listening to either the gossip mill or something going around, or Catherine must have reached out to the right person or people, because on November 20th, 2007, almost an entire month since Aeryn had disappeared, the news of his disappearance finally hit the local media and press, as did Catherine's search for answers. However, Catherine said, quote, "The headlines were startling," end quote, with most of them stating things like, quote, "UN diplomat runs naked through the streets," end quote, and quote, "Mr. Gay Austria, gay this, gay that, spontaneous suicide," end quote. So the newspapers and all of the media were essentially going along with the police's random spontaneous suicide theory and putting that in the press's ear so that the press could give it to the people of Vienna. When talking about these headlines later on, Catherine stated, quote, "And I know it's not fair to stereotype an entire country or a group of people, but all I could think of was 60 years ago, 64 years ago, they were doing the same thing," end quote. She was speaking of the giant memorial she filmed of all of the Austrian Jews that were killed in World War II. And I was going to go a little deeper into that because Catherine does, but again, in the interest of saving time and kind of just taking out what isn't completely relevant to Aeryn's case, if you want to know about that, do your own research, do your own deep dive. Catherine stated through tears, quote, "They made him small. They just minimized him. They put all of these labels on him so that he wasn't a real person anymore," end quote. She also tearfully stated, quote, "And they're turning my son into this creature, not even a person, to be mocked," end quote. My heart just breaks for Catherine. Catherine stated that part of her routine through all of this time that she was in Vienna and staying in Aeryn's apartment, on the days when she wasn't meeting with the a-hole police or going to UNIDO or whatever, on the days that she kind of had off and didn't have anything to do, she couldn't just sit in his house and go crazy. She had to be doing something. So what she would do was walk to the train station, take the train all the way to the last stop, and then walk back a few miles to the Kaiserbrundel, and she would stand out front of it holding Aeryn's picture. And she did this pretty much every night. I guess if she had something to do during the day and she had time at night, this is what she did. She wanted to make her presence known. She wanted to make the Kaiserbrundel let whoever's in charge there know that she is not going away. She is not going to be silenced, and her son matters. And she is going to go to the ends of the earth to her last breath to find out what happened to him. On December 4th, 2007, while Catherine was standing outside of the Kaiserbrundel doing this, staring up at it and holding the picture of Aeryn, she was approached by a man who spoke broken English. The way Catherine described it was that this young man was so excited to see the picture of Aeryn. He asked if she was Aeryn's mother. She said yes. He was excited and he was rapidly speaking in this like halting English, Catherine called it, this broken English, about Aeryn and sharing stories about Aeryn really quickly. And he decided to invite her in to the Kaiserbrundel. Guys, she got invited in there. And she said to him, I can't go in there. I'm not allowed. And he said, "You can come in with me." He was going to give her a tour. And Catherine said the whole time her heart was like pounding because she was trying so hard to act interested in the architecture, which is beautiful, guys. If you look up the Kaiserbrundel, it's been there since like, I think I read the 1300s. But anyway, she said that, but she wanted information on Aeryn so badly, but she had to kind of play it cool and pretend like she was interested in this guy's stories. Maybe she was. or the architecture of the place and tried to pretend like she wasn't there to get information about Aeryn, which is kind of exactly obviously why she was there. I can't imagine how hard this must have been. This young man's name was Jens, and he said he spoke a few words in English, but he only really spoke German. And he had a woman there who Catherine said was, quote, either American or Canadian, end quote, who was translating between the two of them. So Jens ended up giving Catherine the tour of the Kaiserbrundel, and this is just speculation on my part, but I'm sure it must have felt like to her like the smallest of victories, but at least a victory after everything she had been through up until this point. Catherine stated that many times during this tour, Jens would just stop and start sobbing uncontrollably, like hysterically crying, sobbing. She said at one point she went to put a hand on his shoulder to comfort him, to which Evelyn told her not to touch him because, quote, this is very hard on him, end quote. So this is hard on Jens. Catherine said she was very confused, but this wasn't even as weird as things got. When they entered one room, which was supposedly the last room Aeryn was ever seen, the room that he went running naked out of, Jens got down on his hands and knees, started sobbing hysterically and rubbing the tiled floor in this room. He could not be consoled. He could not be comforted in any way. Catherine said no matter what happened, though, she had to keep her cool because she knew she would be thrown out immediately if they knew what she was really doing, which was one, obviously trying to get information on Aeryn, but two, she was scoping the place out for cameras. So back to Jens falling all over the ground and crying hysterically, Catherine kind of whispered to Evelyn, like, what's going on with Jens? And Evelyn responded, quote, this is the last place he saw Aeryn, end quote. Finally, after a few minutes, it seems like Jens had finally composed himself and they continued on with this tour of the Kaiserbrundel. When this tour was almost finished, Catherine figured she had seen the whole place. She saw where the cameras were. Here was her chance. She turned to Evelyn and just flat out told her to ask Jens what happened to Aeryn. Evelyn responded with, quote, he just doesn't want to talk about it, end quote. Evelyn also told Catherine, quote, you need to know that your son is gone. It doesn't matter what happened here. Your son is gone, end quote. Catherine responded with, quote, but it does matter. I need to know what happened to my son, end quote. Evelyn again responded with, quote, it doesn't matter what happened to him here. Your son is gone, end quote. At this, Jens gave Catherine 2 polo shirts that said Kaiserbrundel, of all things, on them, and ushered her out the door and closed the door on her. And that was the end of the tour. That was the end of the first and only time Catherine Gillern had ever been able to step foot in the Kaiserbrundel. When Catherine was asked about the video cameras, had she seen any, she stated that she did. She saw one video camera at the entrance, which I'm assuming is also the exit that Aeryn went out of, because I don't believe from my research that there was a back door. So there's this one entrance / exit. So there was a camera there. So obviously, if the cameras worked, which with this beautiful, immaculate, gorgeous place, upscale, fancy, I'm sure that the cameras did work. Aeryn would have been seen on camera. But anyway, there was a camera there, and there was also cameras in at least one hallway. You got to keep in mind there probably weren't a lot of cameras because bathhouse. That's all I'm going to say. It was a bathhouse. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, guys. The camera that was in the hallway happened to specifically face Aeryn's private dressing room too. Like his private room where he was getting dressed and undressed too, I guess. I don't know how bathhouses work, but I know there's a place you dress and undress. He had his own private room. This camera was in a hallway that was directly facing that room. It's like, here's the camera, here's the room. Catherine stated that she had no idea if the police had ever gone and checked the cameras, but she said regardless of that, she believes 100% without a doubt in her heart, in her very being, that the police know what happened to her son. but that they're never going to tell. But she believes 100%, as do I, and you can let me know how you feel in the comments below. She believes they know what happened to her son. Catherine wanted to stay living in Vienna, specifically stay living in Aeryn's apartment, until she could figure out what happened to him. She didn't want to leave when she still didn't have any answers at all, and in fact had more questions. But she said the problem was she could not afford to pay the rent for Aeryn's apartment and her mortgage back in New York, because if you remember, she had not sold her house yet. She could not get a job in Vienna because she was not a citizen. The only place she could get a job was at the UN, and she said they did not have any work for her. They wanted nothing to do with her about that. I guess she was causing kind of a stir, and that's where Aeryn worked. And, at the end of the day, they probably didn't want the bad publicity either. But Catherine also said she was not in any, as you can imagine, state of mind to be able to hold a job. So she did have to leave Aeryn's apartment and leave Vienna. She stated that even worse than getting on the airplane and going home was packing up Aeryn's belongings that were in the apartment. She said she only packed up what she really could send home, and then she had to give the rest away. And she did go into great detail about this, about, he had a whole life there. He had a whole home there. This wasn't just things. And she was forced to just give things away. She talked about, his baking mixer because he loved to bake, and his pots and his pans, and just all of his things that she had to just give away. She said at nights she would just sit in Aeryn's bathtub and put a washcloth in her mouth and cry and scream at the very top of her lungs in frustration and anger and sadness and pain and heartbreak. She would just put the washcloth in her mouth and scream. Again, through tears, she said, quote, "And I felt like I was abandoning him by coming home, but I didn't have a choice. I had to go home," end quote. When she got back home, Catherine said her friends were trying really hard to convince her to go to the local media, to the American media, and talk about what happened to Aeryn. But she said she absolutely refused. She wanted nothing to do with them. She no longer trusted the police. She no longer trusted any media. She didn't want them doing to him in the United States what they had done to him in the media in Vienna, in Austria. About contacting the media, she stated, quote, "I was afraid that they were going to hurt him, and he'd already been hurt and minimized, and I couldn't let anybody else hurt him. I had to protect him, and if that meant keeping it out of the media, then I was going to keep it out of the media," end quote. In July of 2008, Catherine said she lost her job at the SPCA because she, quote, "didn't fit into their clique," end quote. I have no idea what that means. She didn't elaborate further. Maybe all of the drama, I don't mean to call it drama, but everything going on with Aeryn, I don't know. She didn't specifically say. She just said, quote, "I didn't fit into their clique," end quote. Once she found herself out of work and unable to avoid the situation anymore, when she could no longer live in denial and pretend like this wasn't happening and pretend like Aeryn was going to walk through the door at any minute, when she could no longer pretend that there was no chance she wouldn't see her son smile again or hear his voice, when there were no more walls for her to hide behind, that's when Catherine finally said she realized it just wasn't going away. She had to face it. Since she had been home, she had been hiding from it, but not anymore. Also in July of 2008, Catherine finally decided to take her friend's advice and contact a local media, both the newspaper and television. She said that her friends were extremely helpful in this, in getting the word out about not only Aeryn's disappearance, but what had happened to Catherine while she was in Vienna trying to find answers and get justice for her son and trying to find her son, how she was treated. And again, her friends were telling people, it got around and the media grabbed it up. It was at this time that Catherine decided that on October 29th of that year, she was going to be in Vienna. She was going to be in front of the Kaiserbrundel, and she was going to be holding a vigil for her son. And she said that she vowed to do this every single year, quote, "until I can bring him home," end quote. And that's exactly what she did. She started this tradition in October of 2008 of having this vigil for Aeryn right in front of the Kaiserbrundel. She did it every single year. She said most of the people, if not all, would come up to her when she was holding these vigils and tell her how much they loved Aeryn, or how Aeryn had affected their life in a great way, or something Aeryn had done for them, or how they loved conversating with Aeryn. People loved this guy. I mean, look at his picture. How could you not like just want to get to know him, right? He just looks friendly. They all offered prayers to her and Aeryn and their family. When Catherine came home from holding the vigil in October, when she finally got home, I'm not sure of the exact date, but probably sometime in November of 2008, she saw that a reporter named Joseph Gepp was writing articles about Aeryn and stating that there were no witnesses. Just as the Austrian or the Viennan, the police in Vienna had also stated, and she still did not know where that was coming from because she did not know how the police in Vienna knew that. So how did Joseph Gepp know this? The day after he wrote this article about there being no witnesses, this reporter, Joseph Gepp, actually got an email from a university student in Vienna. This man informed Joseph Gepp through email that he and his girlfriend did in fact see Aeryn that night, the night of October 29th, 2007. They stated they saw Aeryn running up some steps near the Kaiserbrundel, and this made Catherine pause because she was thinking spontaneous suicide. He did run up the steps towards the canal, like the police had said, but this immediately went out of her head when she heard the rest of the story. This man said he and his girlfriend were sitting on a bench and they saw a man who now they know was Aeryn holding his private parts and running from the Kaiserbrundel up these steps. The woman and the man thought that it was some kind of university prank. So the woman playfully wolf whistled at Aeryn. He was naked. The man and the woman then stated to the reporter through email that when she wolf whistled at Aeryn, he turned around and looked right at them, directly in their eyes. And they said that they had, quote, never seen anybody so scared in their life, end quote. I guess as Aeryn was. They could see the fear in his eyes that night. Joseph Gepp insisted to Catherine that, quote, if your son ended up in the canal, it wasn't by choice, end quote. Joseph Gepp decided to bring this information to the Austrian police, figuring maybe they didn't have this information from these witnesses. And that's exactly what he did. However, the police obviously refused to follow up with it. They said that they had already spoken to these two witnesses and that they were not credible, that they were lying. They refused to state how they knew they were lying, why they weren't credible. And they refused to explain why, from the very beginning, they were saying there were no witnesses. If you remember in part one, in the beginning of this part, but now they're saying that they knew about these two witnesses, but there were no witnesses. So again, caught in their web of lies. But it didn't matter because they weren't being held accountable for these lies. And that really makes me mad. And both witnesses stated that they called the police that night and they were interviewed by an investigator, a detective. Also, when the media finally picked up Aeryn's story on November 20th, the couple called the police again and gave the same statement, but nobody ever followed up with them that time. Nothing ever came of their witness statement. When really, if you think about it, they were the only ones that came forward. They couldn't have been the only ones that saw him because there were hundreds of people outside that night. They're the only ones that came forward. And nothing. So the police had this information the entire time, but just kept it from Catherine because they wanted to push the agenda or the story of the spontaneous suicide. Wow. How is this even allowed? As an American, I guess, I don't know if it's just, does anybody else feel this way? Like, how does this even happen? How is this allowed? The male witness actually went so far as to give his name to the reporters and speak out against the police in the papers, which in Austria, this is a huge deal. It's not like it is here, guys. I don't know how it is in the UK, but you don't do this for fear of retribution, obviously, from a corrupt police force. He was willing to do it. That's how vehement he was, that everything that he said was true. But it just didn't matter. It didn't matter. The police were sticking to their story of spontaneous suicide. After all of this, when Catherine was home, she decided to take her friend's advice and get a lawyer. And she said Unito set her up with, quote, a freebie session with an attorney, end quote. This attorney, after hearing the entire story, told Catherine, quote, put your police hat on and think about it, end quote. He put the question to her about how she thinks the oldest and fanciest, most expensive, and kind of renowned bathhouse in Austria has lasted this long without any kind of controversy. He told her it's obvious to him that somebody very, very high up in the Austrian government is somehow connected to the Kaiserbrundel, somehow connected to this sauna. He told her, quote, you'll never find the truth, end quote. Catherine also stated that she spoke with several police officers in Vienna, and they told her that although they knew the case was botched from the beginning, they knew the police were lying, and that most likely the police knew what happened to Aeryn. Quote, they could not talk about it for fear of their lives, end quote. Catherine said the hardest part is living the rest of her life without knowing what happened to her son. She said it's hard enough not having him, but if she knew what happened, at least she would have her son. Like, she would have to bury him. She would know where he is. She would know what happened. It wouldn't be, I don't even think I can explain it. She said the hardest part is the not knowing. She said not knowing is, quote, just this perpetual limbo, end quote. So far we have witnesses that the police said didn't exist, but yet they interviewed. We have this guy at the Kaiserbrundel spa that gives her a tour, that the woman Evelyn says he knows what happened, but he's not ever going to talk about it, that Catherine needs to accept her son is gone. And now we have police officers saying that they know, other police officers or themselves know what happened, but they're not going to say anything. Catherine's still not going to get answers. On October 30th, 2008, Catherine met with the Green Party, which was set up by a very good friend of Aeryn's named Florian. He had come to the vigil the night before and had set up an interview for Catherine with two members of parliament. One of the members deals specifically with police issues, and the other member specifically deals with gay and lesbian issues in the police. Catherine gave them all of the information, everything that I've given to you and more, everything that happened from the beginning when Aeryn disappeared right to that very day. And these two members of parliament filed for an official inquest, and it was actually accepted by the Minister of the Interior. Catherine said this was the most excited she had been about being able to find out what happened and finally getting some justice and some answers. But unfortunately, what happened was somehow, instead of being investigated, the police officers ended up being in charge of investigating themselves. These police officers in Vienna that she had been dealing with the entire time, they were set to investigate themselves, which was not supposed to happen, but somebody dropped the ball somewhere, and unfortunately, they were not investigated by an external source. They were investigated internally. I hope you get the gist. I'm trying to explain it the best way that I can. I think you guys understand what I'm trying to say. Sorry. I'm at a loss for words, honestly. Catherine said she was heartbroken and more because her hope was that the police were not only going to have to admit that they had treated the case badly, they had treated her son badly, they had treated her badly, they had lied, they had fabricated information, they were manipulating information, they had defamed her son, and she wanted them to admit also that, quote, in Aeryn's absence, they had treated him deplorably, end quote. But as I said, in February of 2009, it was not going to be turned over to an external source. It was turned over to internal investigations. And obviously they found that the case was not mishandled. The case was not botched, and everybody was treated fairly. The investigation was done properly, and there just had no leads come from it. Nobody knew what happened. The police were not in the wrong at all. They were not made to be held accountable. Are you freaking kidding me? Oh, that's what they said too. on the night of Aeryn's disappearance that they didn't respond to the scene. As Gunther had said, he said only an ambulance and the fire department showed up, but not the police when he called the police. So the police said only the fire department showed up. So we don't have anything to do with that. We didn't even respond that night. It wasn't even a case we were supposed to be dealing with. I don't know. Sorry, I'm getting all crazy eyed, but I'm so aggravated. We're almost at the home stretch here, guys. Get ready. On February 10th, 2009, the Austrian parliament officially declined to investigate Aeryn's case any further. Catherine said this decision did not make her feel defeated in any way because she fully expected it. After everything that had happened, it's a horrible freaking shame, but the woman expected this to happen. This miscarriage of justice, this atrocity. Guys, I'm sorry, but that's pretty much it. The only update I found was from October of 2019, and I'm going to be looking over here because it's like an entire Facebook post. It's huge, and it's from Aeryn's mother's, Facebook that she set up for Aeryn. So again, sorry about the reading, but it's long. October 26, 2019. At this time of year, I would normally be writing from Vienna. This year, unfortunately, I am not. 12 years ago, October 29th, 2007, Aeryn left his job at UNIDO, and less than 30 minutes later, after arriving at the Kaiser Brundle, he was gone. 12 years later, I am still left with the same questions and no answers. The same pain, emptiness, and anger and frustration. They say time heals all wounds. I say it doesn't. This year, I am unable to go to Vienna. My mother, Aeryn's grandmother, is now 102 and a half years old. In the past, I was able to feel comfortable leaving her to travel to Vienna for the vigil and to meet with the cold case squad, either through FaceTime or with my daughter-in-law regular visiting her. FaceTiming is no longer an option, and my son and daughter-in-law had my first grandchild a month ago. They lovingly named him Aeryn, spelled Aaron. Leaving my mother for any length of time is not an option that I could reconcile with. Not being in Vienna on the 29th, spending time with people who knew and loved him, as well as so many people that have entered my life throughout the last 12 years, has been an extremely difficult decision, but a necessary one. Please keep Aeryn in your hearts and minds. For all those who have stood next to me on the steps of the church, I will be back. For all those who have lit candles in their homes and hearts, please continue to do so. I have not given up my search for the truth and for justice for Aeryn. Thank you, Catherine Gillern. Now, in some reports, his mother's name is spelled Gillearn, and she actually spells it this way here. So I just want to mention that why his last name is Gillern and hers is Gillerin. I'm so sorry I've been saying Gillern the entire time because I assumed. So anyway, that's it. Nothing new on this case. Nobody held accountable. So guys, I hope I did this video justice. I did a two-parter, so I didn't have to leave out a lot of information. I hope that you're not offended by the Halloween background, as obviously this is not a spooky case, but I had to get it done. I've been sitting here for an hour and a half now filming this video. I don't know how long or short it's going to be. I want it to be absolutely perfect. Let me know how you like the way I'm filming now. And again, I'll pop an iCard here if you guys want to see something spooky, or maybe here. If you want to check out something spooky, and I'll give you another true crime case in the end card. So guys, karma is a blessing. Be kind. Do you guys love it? I love it. Really though, be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything and can gain you so much. I'll see you guys tomorrow at some point, probably for a quick video. I'm supposed to be having some company that I'm kind of excited to have. A family member I haven't seen in a long time, but it's still kind of iffy. But I always make time for you guys. And if not, you'll see me Monday. I'm trying to get a better schedule up. I'm actually in Little Bit's room right now. I had to take some stuff down. This is his dresser. So like I said, all of my background setups are going to be like put up in tear downs because I just don't have any space in my house right now that's mine, except for the den downstairs, which I am going to work on. But again, I don't know, guys. I'm trying really hard to make my stuff look better and more professional for you guys, so you'll want to stick around. If you haven't already, please subscribe and please give this video a big thumbs up. It'll make me really, really happy. I get my 22 months clean in this coming week. So at some point this week or possibly next week, you'll see my video about that, everything I've been going through with my meds, with clinic, and my comment shout outs, my subscriber shout outs. So if you've commented in any of the past like 4 or 5 videos and I haven't shouted you out yet, and maybe if I already did shout you out, because sometimes I forget, I will shout you out and give you a big thank you for your awesomeness of subscribing to my channel. If you have not commented anything and you want me to just give you a shout out when I do these subscriber shout outs, just go below and comment like pumpkin, comment a pumpkin. Okay, let's do that. That's a fun little game we can do. Thank you guys so much for your never-ending optimism and support of me and your kindness, especially. That's about it. I love you guys. Have your best day. Mwah. Or night. Take a look at this one more time, though. I just got to get the lighting correct for how you'll be able to see my face. Unless I could do it like this. That's too dark, though, right? Let me know, guys, if you have any suggestions. I don't know how to do lighting. Right now, my phone is filming. It's sitting on a stack of RJ's books. Love you guys. Bye-bye.